Okay, so I'm intrigued, Stuart. You've done this amazing research, and I'm so looking forward to you coming back to Devon so that we can look more at Mills's early life. But what's your sense of this man personally, from your research? How do you feel about William Whitfield Mills?
He's energetic, and he proved his mettle in the previous year to the time in Alice Springs, because what I didn't mention, as well as building this line, they actually had to establish a settlement on the north coast where the cable would be landed. And that's Port Darwin, named after Charles Darwin, who never actually went there. The Beagle visited there, but he wasn't there at the time. So a bit like Alice not going to the Alice Spring. So they had to establish that. So he was up there for a year with a big party of surveyors, and that's where he proved his mettle. He also got into trouble for swearing, and he was docked pay for a while. So apparently he was a confident young bloke who was a bit, probably like all of us at that age, a bit full of his own importance. But and he got pulled into line, but very highly regarded. And the interesting thing is, of the 5 surveyors who were each given a part of the central section, he's only 25 years of age. So Charles Todd obviously has great faith in this young bloke that he can lead a team of more than a dozen men and build this length of line. So that says that, yeah, he's obviously a man of quite substance. And I think therefore it's a little bit sad that he has to go in later years looking for work on the mining fields, so he loses his wife and obviously loses his children. And I'll be keen to talk to Bill Stanford, his descendant, in Alice, to actually learn a little bit more. But he knows a bit about the later life. He knows far less than us about Mills's early life, so he's keen to know what we can uncover. But yeah, a bit of a sadness that he ended up a man working on lonely goldfields without his family, and his young wife gone at the age of 30. But I have great respect for him, and as I said, he migrated at the age of 21 with £4 in his pocket. He wasn't prepared to. He wasn't loath to have a go, as we would say in Australia. I think he adopted Australian values and fitted in well. So obviously a man of fairly. You and I talked about this back in Heavitree 18 months ago. From a good family, well educated, but a man of a bit of initiative and a lot of willingness to have a crack.
Yeah, and you obviously you mentioned the Indigenous people of the Alice Springs area, the Arunta.
Yeah, again, emphasis is just even, so Arunta. And the Arunta people are the people of the centre, and there's something like 500 individual languages covering Australia, and so the Arunta language is still alive in the centre. And they were amazingly accepting of the telegraph men, and relations were good because the telegraph men were sensitive. But when the cattle came 2 years later and cattlemen basically took over their country, that's when conflict developed. So it is an interesting story in that the early white contact, 1871-72 in the centre, was actually a time of largely avoidance, but not a time of conflict. So it defies the sort of invasion type idea. And the invasion that happened was an invasion of sheep and cattle, and that's when the problems come, because that's when the Arunta people were disenfranchised of their land. They were kicked off. And so having lived in the territory for 40 years and known lots of Aboriginal people, you know where my sympathies lie. But and I think they were amazingly tolerant to allow the telegraph line to be built without their permission.
So how do you feel about present day? Tell us a little bit about Alice Springs today, and I know that you know Doris Stuart, who's the current custodian of the Gap and the area. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, Doris Stuart I met when I first went to Alice 40 years ago, and I was a school teacher for a while, and I taught her son, and I also coached him playing rugby league. So we have a long connection. Doris is a wonderful, positive woman, and she is the senior custodian for sites. So any work that's done around Alice, all these significant sites, like in Turripa, are actually registered. So there's limits to what you can do without permission. So that all works well. But what's unfortunately happening is that Aboriginal people worked hard for a living for 50,000 years in the centre. It was called hunting and gathering. Now there is very little work outside of a few areas, like there's work in health and police and education and parks, but chronic unemployment in the bush for Aboriginal kids. And people are dependent on welfare, and all of the things that happen all over the world when you have welfare dependency, leading to, you know, drug abuse and alcohol. So I have a sense of sadness, having seen over 40 years problems develop, and older Aboriginal people would have that same sense that, and so there are a lot of social problems now that certainly weren't there when I first went to Alice Springs in 1975. And as I said, that gives me a sense of sadness, but also people, I've never discussed it with Doris, but I think she would have that same sense of sadness, that problems for younger Australians. And I've got to be really brutal. If you're a young bloke growing up on Yuendamu or Papunya or one of the bush communities out from Alice, you've probably got a better chance of going to jail than you have of getting a job. And I think the government really has to look at getting people off welfare. And I really believe, having worked in conservation most of my life, we need a green army. We need to employ people on land management and create work for young Aboriginal people back managing country. Maybe there is a positive future, but that's a story for Indigenous people all over the world, isn't it? The things that follow from, and even though 50% of the territory has been returned to Aboriginal ownership, the lack of work for young people who want work, they do want work, but they can't get it outside of a few areas. As I said, there are jobs in health, Aboriginal health workers, education, police, but generally you're talking about very high levels of unemployment in the bush, and that's a problem which leads to other social issues. So, and it's a problem I've seen grown. I don't want to focus too much on the negatives, but I think we need to recognise that, and recognise that we need changed government policy, because ultimately, as Bobby Kennedy said in 1968, you know, welfare is destructive. Jobs are better than handouts, and we need to. I'm an old-fashioned socialist. I believe in work and what work can give you, and that welfare dependency is not good, no matter whether you live in England or America or Australia. It's not good.
So, what would you, from a British perspective, what would you say to British people about our modern relationship with Australia and with the Indigenous people of Australia and the modern population, which I know is incredibly diverse in Alice Springs?
It's interesting. In a way, I think it's fair to say that Britain isn't all that relevant to Australia anymore, and it's only inevitable that we will become a republic. The only reason the referendum was defeated last time was people were unhappy with the model that was put up. Something like 60-odd% wanted a republic. And our place is in Asia. We are part of Asia, and we really need to look more. But it's interesting, going back to England and spending a week with your people in Devon. I've travelled all around the world. I've been to America multiple times. I've been to Asia. I've been to Europe. But I still actually, it surprised me how much I feel a sense of affinity with Britain, because we do have a lot of shared values. And I think that will always survive, even though, to be realistic, as a people, we need to be looking to Asia, not to America or to England. But I think there will always be special bonds. And I realised that last time, a lot of our values are very similar. And even though we live a very different life, and our position in the world has changed differently, maybe Australia will have a little bit of a comeback, and New Zealand with the Brexit and re-establishing some of the markets. But so what I'm saying is, while I see myself as a person living in the Asian part of the world, I look forward to going back to England, because I realise there are some, not just historical bonds, but some real values that we share, and maybe we can provide some joint leadership in a world that politically worries me at the moment. Yeah, and I hope Britain, England can play a role, because certainly some of the other dominant powers are not necessarily taking us down the line we want to go. But let's not get into too much politics. But I say that to emphasise the fact that I was surprised how comfortable I felt when I walked around the streets of Exeter 18 months ago, and I'm keen to come back. And I thought, yeah, there's something about this that connects to the heart that I didn't expect it.
Yay! Oh, well, that feels like a really wonderful place to leave it, on a very strong invitation to come back and see us, and let's go to Plymouth and let's unearth Mills's early heritage and explore that further. But for now,
yeah, he is. I mean, all the streets in Alice Springs are named after people in the history. Unfortunately, not enough Aboriginal names there, and we're changing that. But yeah, Mills is well known. I've got close friends who live in Mills Street, so I go there every time I'm back in Alice. So he will always be remembered for his contribution, and it would be nice for Heavitree people to know, and Plymouth people to know a little bit more of him if we can unravel that. It's been a pleasure to spend the time with you, Jojo.
yay. Thank you so much, Stuart. Thank you so much.
Thank you for teaching me some new technology.